So today we're going to take a look at this mini tower case from Cougar. This is the MG140 Air RGB version. This particular case comes pre-installed with 320mm 8 RGB fans. It does also have a RGB controller included. That controller can be controlled by a button on the front panel, and it's got 13 presets built into it. It's also got a cable you can connect it to your motherboard and get motherboard control on it as well. So we'll take a look at that and see how well that works and looks. If you decide you want to do water cooling in this PC, you get a couple of different options. In the front, it supports a 280, a 240, a 140, and a 120mm AIO. The top shows no support for AIOs, and the rear shows support for 120mm AIO. Fan support is in the front. You get 220mm fans or 240mm fans. Same with the top, 220 or two 140mm fans, and in the rear you get 120mm fans. And a couple of key specs on this that you'll want to know is the maximum CPU heatsink height is 160mm or 6.3 inches. That'll be important if you plan on putting like some super huge heatsink on there. You'll want to check that spec. And the maximum power supply length is going to be 160mm. The maximum GPU length is going to be 350, so make sure you check that and make sure your GPU will fit in it. The front I/O panel has got two USB 3.0 ports, two USB 2.0, a mic, an audio jack, and the RGB button. So your storage options on this are going to be up to 6 2.5-inch SSDs, and for regular 3.5-inch hard drives you get 2 slots. Now if you install a 280mm AIO in the front, that will reduce that number of 3.5-inch drives by 1. It will interfere with that top slot. All right, so let's go ahead and get this out of the box and we'll take a quick look at it. The case itself, the construction is fairly typical, of any real mid-tower case. You've just got 2 thumb screws holding the glass on and the back cover. This one's fairly secure until you pull it back, and then it will kind of go ahead and let go. So anyways, no big deal there. That works pretty good. There is no protective film on the back, so be careful with that as you're getting your build done. The front has the protective film on it. Getting the back cover off, 2 thumb screws. This one you probably want to hold on to a little bit. First time I took it apart, it kind of fell off on me. Anyways, just you slide it back, comes right off. It's just got a couple little hooks here on the side and a couple little screws here on the case that they just kind of lock into. So not as secure, but fairly standard. The front panel is just one of these compression fit. It's just got the pins that come through the case. And you just give it a good grasp right here, and you just kind of pull on it. Now I will say, compared to a lot of these cases, I really like the amount of grip that this has. It comes off not easy, but you don't have to really wrench on it really hard. Going around the front here, we've got a magnetic dust filter. Anyways, the fans are pre-installed for you. The cables are already run. Going around the side, again, this case supports mini ITX and micro ATX. There's really nothing internally here to speak of. You've just got your cables that you got to undo and kind of finish routing around. Your standoffs are pre-installed, and there's really nothing else in here. There is one screw right here, which I don't hate. I would have preferred maybe they'd found something else, but that screw is to get this bottom panel off, which I do appreciate the fact that this comes off. But I don't know why they had to put this one lone screw here. So anyways, to get this side panel off here, it's this screw right here. And then there are 2 screws in the back. Once you get that off, this side panel just slides back and comes right off. It's just got a couple of little hooks right here that kind of secure it to the case. So moving around the back here, fairly typical. It's going to take a standard power supply, and you've got 4 expansion slots here. These 2 thumb screws here just hold this securing bracket on, for your PCI cards here. So anyways, you just put your cards in, secure that up, tighten it up. There really is no vertical GPU support or anything like that. So moving around the back here, we get 2 2.5-inch drive sleds. Just a single thumb screw holding those together. They are metal. They're not the thickest metal in the world, but definitely adequate to get a couple of drives mounted. We do get the RGB controller built in here. It comes pre-installed with the lead. It looks like it goes to what would normally be the reset switch, but they've actually marked it RGB, so it's just the same type of switch, but that's nice. They've already connected that for you. The 3 fans are connected. Now these are a 3-pin RGB cable, and each of these cables has a pigtail on it so that you can add additional devices, RGB devices to that, just the standard 3-pin RGB. So, and then of course on that RGB controller you get the RGB cable that will go to your motherboard, and includes the 3-pin VDG cable for gigabyte, and you also get the SATA power connection that you'll need to connect that to. Obviously we get all of the cable runs for the front panel. The drive bays down here does come with a removable drive sled. Now this drive's bay itself is removable. If we look on the bottom here, we get a couple of screws, and then this just kind of clips in. So you just pull it back and we can remove it. That'll be helpful if you're not going to use this and you would like a little bit of additional room down here. It does have a dust filter over the power supply intake here, so you can remove that and go ahead and get that cleaned up. Moving up to the top, you do have a magnetic dust filter on the top. So let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and get a few components installed in this, and we'll take a look at how it looks. All right, so I've got the build in the Cougar Mini Tower case done. I would just classify it as a typical case to build in. There's nothing really negative about it. There's nothing super unique or amazing about it either. Cable management's always kind of a little bit of an issue, only because there's no real cable management mechanisms in here other than just what's typical, a couple of hooks and places to kind of zip tie things down to. Anyways, I kind of left the cooling options just as it was out of the box, just the 3 fans. So if you were to start adding a bunch of additional fans, AIOs, water cooling, additional RGB elements, things like that, definitely it's going to add to your cable management. Or if you were to add a bunch of additional disk drives to this, you definitely could clog it up pretty good, and you'll have to get creative with that. But sometimes that's the fun of it. But anyways, moving on to the RGB elements that this case comes with. I didn't mention it earlier, but these fans are just 3-pin DC controlled fans. That's if your motherboard will do DC voltage control. I did install a PWM hub from Deep Cool in here just to connect all those two, only because this ITX board really just has the CPU header for the CPU fan, and then just an additional system fan header. So I plugged in a hub to that. So because of that, I only get 12 volts to those fans. They're just running the maximum RPMs, which appears to be about 1150, somewhere right around there. That's all I ever saw out of it. But the RGB lighting itself, the controller works really good. Like I said, everything's kind of plugged in already for you. It's the standard 3-pin RGB connector, which I really like. It's got the pigtails coming off the back. You can add additional RGB elements to that. You know, it's got ports for 6 fans on there, or 6 RGB devices. And I've added another fan back here just for demonstration purposes. I haven't even plugged this fan in. It's just to test this controller and make sure that it works. But the RGB on it is decent enough. Basically, you just click the button up on the top and you can switch through all the different colors. I think it's got 13 different presets that you can go through. There's nothing crazy about it, but it's definitely sufficient for some just basic lighting. To get it into the motherboard mode, because it does connect up to the motherboard, which I've done on this case, you just press and hold the button. As soon as it blinks, it then puts you into a motherboard mode. Now this is a Gigabyte Aorus board, so I've got RGB Fusion installed. All of these right here are from the Gigabyte motherboard. And we won't go through every one, obviously, but just to give you kind of an idea. So this front panel has this vent material on it, and then you get a dust filter across the fans here. That does kind of create a unique look for the RGB on the front of this case. So you get kind of a weird effect on it, which I don't necessarily mind. I think it looks all right. It kind of, what's the thing? It just kind of diminishes the effect a little bit. So, you know, there's really nothing you could do. You can unscrew this internal filter here if you really wanted to get more out of it, you know, or I suppose you could actually just remove it. But anyways, this is kind of what the fan looks like just by itself. This is a Cougar JR120 fan. Now, I couldn't find any official specs on it, but the only RGB it's got is just in the center hub. I'll go ahead and go through a couple more of these. You can get an idea of what that looks like. But overall, I would say the RGB is, you know, fairly nice to it. I really like the controller. You know, there's no remote that comes with it. The button is all you get, or motherboard control. And then I think if you hold that button for like 6 seconds, it just turns it off. So overall, the RGB on this, definitely a plus, you know, other than that it's just basic. So you could definitely replace these fans out. You could do a bunch of other stuff. You could add additional RGB. You know, it's got plenty of expansion capability for this. Now, there's no real customization on this RGB controller. It really is just an RGB hub is all you're controlling. So you can't, you know, animate across fans and things like that. You'll need to step up to, you know, something like Corsair, obviously, to do that. Now, as far as cooling on this case, again, there's not crazy powerful overclocked hardware in here, but I did just do some basic tests of this in Prime 95, try to heat everything up as much as I could. This case was fairly typical in its cooling. I really was not ever able to get it over 70°C with just the fans here. Now, I did try removing this just to see if this was kind of restricting airflow a little bit, and as well as moving the dust filter on the front to see if it would cool down at all. Now, it does, some air can come up underneath here and up into here, but removing this and the dust filter really made no difference. It didn't cool it down at all. Your results are just going to vary wildly from what mine did based on what hardware you put in here, how you have it configured, if you're doing overclocking. You know, but with just the stock fans with basic hardware, no overclocks or anything in it, cooling was acceptable. But anyways, you could definitely improve upon that, putting some water cooling, additional fans, things like that. But that's kind of the fun of it, is messing around with that. But anyways, cooling on this case, again, fairly typical to what I've got on most of the other cases that I've tested this same hardware in. So I don't think there's any negatives about this case as far as cooling goes. So would I recommend that you run out and buy this case right now? Well, I think that's going to come down to mostly the aesthetic of this case. It's an aesthetic that I really like, and which is one of the main reasons I wanted to take a look at it. So to me, it's kind of got that Star Wars sandcrawler look a little bit, you know, from the side profile. I think it just looks good. And other than that, there's nothing amazingly unique about this case. You know, it's fairly typical of cases in this, you know, size and range. So, but what's here is functional. It looks good. You know, the RGB elements, the fans that are pre-installed, although they're on the cheap and expensive side, it's functional. They work. There's no issues with them. I do like the RGB controller. Again, it's basic. It's really just a splitter more than anything, but it's got lots of options to add to it, and it's the standard 3-pin RGB, which I think is a cool touch from Cougar. So, you know, you've got lots of additional options there. You've got some cooling options if you're going to put little fancier, more powerful hardware in it. And, you know, again, it comes down to the look, I think. You know, for, you know, just your basic PC build, I think this case, you really couldn't go wrong. I don't have any real gripes or complaints about it. So anyways, that is going to do it for me today. If you have any questions about this case, comments, or what your experience is with it, please let me know in the comments below. I'll answer those the best I can when I can, and that is going to do it for today. Thank you.